Welcome back. So now we know how to spawn our fruits, right? So we're spawning these fruits all the time, and you can see we can make all of them destroy. Well, with our space key, they will explode into all kinds of directions and all of that good stuff. So that by itself is pretty cool, but what if we could spawn them and actually shoot them? And what if we have multiple spawn points? Well, the thing about the multiple spawn points, let's start with that. Because if we look at our spawner here, we created these spawn places, right? So what we can do is we can say, all right, we want to have 3 spawn places. So if you enter 3 here, what will happen is you will now have 3 elements here that you can use. So you can add transforms, which means locations, where you want items to spawn. So what we can do is we can just go ahead and create new game objects, empty ones, and call this one spawn point, for example. And let's say we put this one at 0, 0, 0. Let's jump over to it. Okay, there it is. So now let's reposition it a little bit. I want it to be outside of the view of my camera. So my camera can see this stuff. So let me add the gizmo to my spawner point here, like so. And this will now be my spawn point, and let me drag it down here, let's say to -10. We can then later on see if this is going to do the trick. Okay, something like that. For now, let's use this spawn point. Let's duplicate that spawn point, reposition it a little bit to the side, and another one to the side. So now we have 3 spawn points, and let's drag those spawn points into our spawner. Okay, because what I want to do is I want my spawner to say where items should spawn. Of course, I could have duplicated my spawner. So let's say we don't have those 3 objects, okay? So let's say we have 3 spawners. And let's reposition spawner 2. So it would be a little to the side, and spawn 3 would be a little to the other side. And now let's start the game. So now we have 3 spawners, and they will spawn randomly all the time. That is fine. I mean, that's okay. If you want to do it this way, that's fine. The problem only is that if you do that, then you create the situation where it becomes super difficult to balance. And on the other hand, if we just have 1 spawner, it will be a lot easier to balance, because we can always define how many spawns we want to have and how quickly stuff should spawn. Okay, so that is something that we can handle over our spawner. So I'd say let's go ahead and actually also handle that our items will be spawned, or our fruits will be spawned at random positions. So here, I'm going to create a new transform in my spawner script. I'm going to call this one T as transform, and it will spawn at spawn places random range between 0 and the spawn places dot length. So what that will do is it will simply say use the position of one of those spawn places randomly. Okay, so it will use the spawn places that we have here, which is this transform array. So we have multiple places, right? In our case, we had 3, right? So spawn point 0, spawn point 1, and spawn point 2. So what I'm saying here is take one of those randomly and use that as the spawn place, or use its transform. And now go ahead and use that position to spawn there. So instead of using the position of the spawner itself, use the spawn place that has been selected. As I said, we have 3, right? So now I can just say t.transform and t.rotation here in this line. So here t.transform and t.rotation. So this will be the transform where we spawn something. So this will be the actual location where we spawn it, and this will be the rotation of where we spawn it. And this is super cool, because now we can just rotate our spawn place to what we want it to be, and that rotation will be given to the fruit itself as well. So that by itself doesn't really help unless we add a little bit of force to our game objects. So what we want to do is we want to push those fruits up in the air. So we want to add a, well, not an explosion, but an impulse to them. Okay, so what we can do is, because fruit is a game object, we can access its components. So fruit get component, and we want to access its rigid body And because our fruit has a 2D rigid body, because if you recall, our banana had a 2D box collider and a 2D rigid body. So let's use that rigid body and let's add a little bit of force to it. So add force. And here we can say with how much force we want to, well, how much force we want to add to it. So what I'm going to say is, I want to push it up, but up in comparison to the position of my spawn place. So whatever is up for the spawn place, because up, so let's say we would use vector 3 up, it would always push it up. But what I want to do is, I want to actually use this t dot transform dot up. So it will be up in comparison to this position of the transform that we're looking at. So let's look at this real quick in our game. So here we have our spawn points, right? And this is currently up. So this green arrow is pointing upwards. So now let's say spawn point 1, here in this case, the green arrow should point towards the left. So for it, upwards would be towards the top left. So if I now rotate the Z coordinate of my spawn point, so let's say to something like 25, then this spawn point should look towards the top left. So that's what I want to do. And that's why I'm taking its up. Okay, transform up here. Okay, that by itself is good, but I also need to make sure how, well, to define how strong the force should be. So I'm going to say, give me two values here, public float min force, and let's say that is 10, and then public float max force, let's say that is 20, because I want the fruits to spawn or to be pushed with different forces. So some of them should shoot higher than others, because otherwise they would always come at the same angle with the same speed and all of that kind of stuff. So here I want to multiply it with the range between my min force and my max force. This will make our game a little more engaging and fun. And then we can also define the force mode. So here, let me put that into a separate line so it will be a little more readable. So as we have seen, force mode, there are multiple ones. In this case, we have two options. So either force or impulse. So we're going to use the impulse one, which is an instant force impulse that will be added to the rigid body 2D. And now let's fix another problem at the same time, because we are spawning the fruits, but we also need to destroy those fruits at one point. So let's destroy the fruit after 5 seconds. So this destroy method has multiple overloads once again. And if I give it a float, so this 5f here, for example, what it will do is it will remove a game object after a certain period of time. So here we're creating this fruit, then we're pushing the fruit up, we're spawning it and shooting it up, so to speak. And after 5 seconds, we're destroying the fruit so that we don't have an unlimited amount of fruits in our game at one point. So let's save this and let's run our game real quick just to see how this is going to look like. So we're spawning those fruits, but we don't see all of them. So you see sometimes spawn point 2 spawns the fruit, sometimes spawn point 1 spawns the fruit. Okay, so there they are. So we need to push them up a little bit, like so. And now let's look at the game, and you see now the fruits are coming from different angles. This one comes from a different angle, as you saw, because I gave this spawn point a different Z coordinate. So if I gave this spawn point the other way around, so 25 minus for Z, what will happen is it will push it from the left-hand side in, like so. Okay, but as I made these changes while I was in play mode, let's make those changes while we are outside of play mode as well. Let's change the position to maybe something like -5 for all of them. -5. And now let's run the game again. So now these spawn points will be still underneath our screen, and now we can actually play around with the values here just to see what will be better. What you will also see is that the bananas, after a while, they disappear as well. Okay, so now we could make sure that the bananas cannot stack on top of each other. We can play around with a bunch of values. See here, We can play around with the spawner, changing its min weight and max weight, changing the force. Let's say we want them to be at least 20 and max force 40, then the bananas will come in faster. You see, they're being shot quite strong, like so. Definitely too much. Let's use between 12 and 25 maybe. And also play around with the angles. What you can definitely also do is you can get rid of your bananas that you have in the game. We're going to do the balancing or a little more balancing later on, but for now, let's get rid of those. Let's save the scene and see you in the next video.